You know, Scott, you're not. I don't think you're recording, Scott.
I'm not recording?
I don't see a glowing blue dot, a red
mine,
dot next to
Mine
your
tells
name.
me red dot. It does say
Okay.
recording.
Okay.
I believe it.
Okay, cool. I just don't see it on the, but it's probably just a glitch.
I mean,
Great.
if I'm not recording, I'll just remember what I say, and then I'll go back later.
Just go back and
I'll play your two
and
sides.
speak yours like a cartoon.
And that way I could correct anything that I said wrong, or if I know I'm setting you up, I can really make you guys.
This
sound
is
dumb.
what I need for my actual life. Like I need that so that I can go back and like fix when I say stupid things.
You want a Groundhog Day switch that you can just flip on at will until you get a thing, and then you're like, all right, now I'll flip it back to regular time.
That could.
I mean, there are some days where you're like, this day is going to be important. I'm going to flip on the Groundhog Day switch.
I think there is a Rick
so
and
that
Morty.
I can make sure
there's
I
a Rick
have
and Morty where he can set a save point and go back to it, and so he sets save points and he tries to do things, and he gets back to the save point every time until it goes the way he likes, and then he can like erase the save point.
Man, there are definitely days I would like that ability for real.
Wait, we have to talk. You don't even know Manuel. We have to
Not at all.
introduce Manuel.
Please.
Hey, welcome, Manuel. Do you want to introduce
Thank
yourself and like anything about you, like the names
sure.
of your children? I don't know. No, I'm
Names of my
just
That's where you start usually. Okay.
Yeah.
Happy to. So I have 3 children:
Wow.
Jonathan, Constantine, and Frederick.
Oh, great!
You
All
have a-
boys.
Those
Yeah,
are
all
great
boys,
names. Those are really fun.
And with Constantine, I don't know. In English speaking, in German, it's Konstantin. That's pretty simple. But English speaking, I hear sometimes Constantine, sometimes Constantine. So he has to figure this out for himself.
We
I
can
guess.
go find those people who say Constantine and just punch them. That's
Yeah, I was just going to say, don't worry about the constant.
Okay.
those people
not-
are weird.
That's off.
No one ever said.
Okay.
I think you're safe, but
Yeah.
you just ran
I'm
into
relieved.
a weirdo.
Yeah.
Okay. That's great.
Well, hi, Manuel.
Hi.
I'm Scott. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I have a bit of an advantage, Scott, because I've, of course, listened to a couple of episodes, so I already learned a bit about you.
Well, welcome to the show. I don't know what the solution is or what we're going to do, but welcome also everybody.
I don't know
listening.
either. I'm in
Welcome.
the dark this episode too.
This isn't in the dark. We're both in the dark.
Yes,
Yeah.
Manuel
Adam didn't
holds
ask.
all the cards.
Fantastic. Well, then, Adam, then your job is you have to introduce our guest. Tell us who he is
Okay.
and why our guest is here for us.
Everyone, this is Manuel Dolderer. He is a founder and a director of a small innovative university in Berlin called
Cool.
Code University that teaches people how to code in university, hence the name.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And we've worked together kind of because I've started a university here that was to teach people how to code at the almost the same time as Manuel was starting Code University. So we've chat every year or so. We'd have a little meeting and sort of clutch our hair in despair with all the problems that we both have.
Fantastic. So, Manuel, are you joining us from Germany today?
Yes.
Whoa. This is international. I had no idea.
Global. We had Finland the other couple weeks ago, and
I
now we
listened to
got
that.
Germany. Yeah.
It's a great episode. Yeah.
Now I feel even more embarrassed that I showed up on the Zoom call wearing a blanket with a hood originally. Not
Don't
the
worry
best.
about that.
Not the best impression of Americans to give off. But yeah, our
Well, you
public image is
Not great right now.
Not always that.
Not
good.
for the past
Not so
40
much.
years or so. It hasn't been.
We're
very
working
good.
on it. We're trying.
Are we though?
Let's see.
I feel like we're just digging deeper.
We're
and
saying
deeper.
we're working on it.
We're saying that
We're
we're
saying
working on
we're
it.
working on it.
Yeah. We're like an alcoholic with like a drink in our hand, and we're like, I'm working on it. Go ahead,
I think
Michael.
there's some people who don't really care about the perspectives of the rest of the world.
Right.
Very much so.
Yeah.
very much so.
Unselfconscious. Yeah.
So we're both in the dark.
Yeah,
Manuel,
what's the idea?
bring
What's-
us a solution
yeah,
today.
let's
What do you
hear it.
got?
Well, to be honest, it wasn't kind of a hard decision to make. So in our last conversation, Adam just told me about the podcast, and I said, "Hey, maybe it can come on." I said, "Yes, but you have to bring a solution, a unique solution for some problem," and that really intrigued me. So I kept wondering, what could it be? What could it be? I listened to a couple of episodes, and I love the idea of an inflation-proof money or
Yeah.
currency. I still don't believe it works, but it's an intriguing thought.
We'll see. I have a little.
I'll go
Yeah.
bankrupt if it doesn't, so that'll be
Oh,
fun.
And and I thought about maybe I want to talk about techno literacy and why I think that everybody and every person on the planet should have a basic understanding about technology. But in the end, it's what I'm doing, what's at the core of our university is a learning concept that's very much project based. And I think we can solve all of our problems with education if we radically switch to a project-based learning concept, starting with first grade all up until master's level.
And that's new because project-based learning is pretty narrow right now, and it's usually reserved for the older students. Yeah. But you're saying first graders should be like, let's do projects. Let's already start. That's cool.
Can you explain what do you mean by project-based learning? How is that different from the way everyone normally learns?
So the main difference is that you are, as a student, you are working on something that is your own project. So it starts with you owning something and being responsible for something. And that already is one of the big differences, because as a student in a traditional environment, you're not responsible for anything apart from passing a test at some point. But whether paying attention or not, whether you're in class or not, nobody really cares. You don't have any stakes in that. And that changes once you have a project. Ideally, a project that you are really interested in, curious about, and that you want to succeed with. So that makes you have some stakes in the game. You feel some responsibility. That's one of the main differences. Another difference would be that usually these projects are not a solo project, but you're working in a team. So all of a sudden, learning becomes a team effort. Yeah. And this also provides a playground for peer-to-peer learning and a lot of other advantages that I see happening every day at Code University, but also when I'm reading up on certain experiments in that regard that I see that are associated with project-based learning.
So traditional learning is not project-based. What is it based on? Generally, in your kind of, or is there like an official?
Traditional learning is curriculum-based. So there are abstract theoretical learning goals that are defined and that students need to meet in some sort of defined assessment setup.
Right. So project-based learning, does project-based learning still achieve a curriculum, or is it more sort of free-flowing, or do you say make a project that achieves these learning goals? So it's still somewhat curricular, but it feels like the difference would be maybe that the traditionally you're like learning all these different concepts and things, and the idea is, you can use them in a practical application at some point down the road. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of switching it around where it's like, we're going to start doing a practical thing, and because you have to do that, you're going to learn these things that you need to do it. We're just doing it the other way around, right, so that it sticks maybe better.
That's one of the ideas, and you can actually see that happening. And with regards to your question about curriculum, I think you can have it both ways. You can either define projects, basically hoping that students will achieve certain learning goals that are aligned with your curriculum. You can also leave this up to the students and say, I don't really know what these students need for their lives, so I'll let them set their own goals, choose their own projects, and live with whatever competency profile they gain from working on their projects. Right. I think if you're talking about younger students, it makes sense to have an overarching curriculum and then sit down with educators and basically designing the projects in a way that students reach certain learning goals.
Kind of reminds me of what I don't know a ton about Montessori schools practically. I mean, I've read a bunch of Montessori's books, but like by Montessori herself, but I actually haven't worked in any actual Montessori school, but I've heard it described like a Montessori school is something like that, where they have like, I mean, it's not really projects. It's like little toys and like little kind of things you're supposed to sort of achieve and unlock in order to kind of get to the next level or whatever. Yeah.
For me, it's not about gamification, or it's much more than that. And it's also not about problem-based learning. There's a problem-based learning is where you actually sit down with educators and carefully design a problem, and you already have very specifically learning outcomes in mind, and students need to kind of reach these learning outcomes. Otherwise, the problem-based learning process has failed. So it's highly artificial. There's a 7-step process in place. So it doesn't really feel like a real project you're working on. And it's also not gamification because projects are real. The issues, the problems that you're facing are real.
You're not getting like points and gold stars that are at the they're kind of shellacked onto the activity. It's like, no, you're actually just doing a project, which is a real thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the other thing is what we learn, even up to MBAs, is case-based learning, where predefined cases are what you're studying, what you're trying to solve using certain methods and theories. Real-world problems and real-world projects are messy. So they're hard to define. They're hard to grasp. The challenge doesn't start with solving them or finding the right method to apply. but understanding the project, the problem, the issue you're dealing with. And that's usually the bigger part. At Code, we have a saying that goes, fall in love with the problem, not the solution.
Ooh.
Because you've all heard about the man with a hammer for whom every problem looks like a nail just because you have a hammer. That's what you're trying to avoid. And that's what is part of a real world project and usually not part of an educational environment.
That's excellent.
Yeah. I think the private space has sort of taken this on here, at least in the States, because I see a lot of these. My daughter gets a box every month with a different thing to build, like a different project in it to build. Mm-hmm. It's like a subscription thing. And I've seen a lot of these subscription things for different areas of interest or different levels of expertise. And they're huge. And my daughter loves building it. And it's like, it demonstrates, oh, here's a project with a beginning and like you can see all the boundaries of it and you can do the thing. And she loves doing it. She gets into the instructions and she goes through them and she builds a thing. And then she's like, look, I have a thing. It's really cool.
And now imagine that happening in every class, basically, in every grade, from first grade. Students don't sit in classrooms anymore and not knowing why they should care about the stuff that's being taught. It's that they have something that they're intrigued to do. They're going out there, they're working together, they're trying to solve something, to create something meaningful, and are really proud of what they're achieving. They can fail and they can learn about productive failing in a way. And what we see at Code with our students, and what I think would also work with younger students, is that once you're in a project, you realize what you don't know and what you need to know and understand or be able to do to get to the next level or to be successful with your project. So you start asking for input. You start approaching your teacher and say, hey, I need input from you. You need to help me here. We need to, deal with this issue or that problem.
I think that's called metacognitive in education, right? So the student is aware of their own knowledge that they need to learn and then aware of how they and start to become resourceful about how they can actually get that knowledge, which is completely, it's just night and day from I'm sitting here, I'm a receptacle for knowledge. I take notes in the lecture, then I do the worksheet, then later I read more and study more. I'm more of a receptacle. And then at the end, I have a test that I know is going to be a regurgitation of the things that were said during the lecture and in the readings, which is completely, you're never at any point of that required to actually be metacognitive and think, what do I know? What don't I know? Like, what does learning what I don't know actually get me in the world?
There are a bunch of people who will learn and then they have a problem turning their knowledge into like a practical thing. Like when it comes time to like, all right, now it's time to perform. They're like, this part I haven't done so much. I'm like really awkward and can't figure out how to put these pieces together. Yeah. But if you've been doing it the whole time, that becomes just second nature. Yeah.
And as Adam said, you don't need artificial rewards because they can be punishing as well. I don't know if you've heard about the book Punished by Rewards. It's really interesting description of what happens if you reward the wrong thing. So you have to be really careful with rewards in general. And of course, we all are aware of the discussions about grades and stuff. But if it works well, the project itself is a reward because you're creating something that gets attention, that gets celebrated, presented, that actually solves a problem for someone or gets some sort of recognition.
Yeah, so it's sort of organically right.
So I have to bring up, there's definitely a percentage of people who I would know who hear the words group project and get a little bit of trauma from their school because
absolutely, yeah.
Because the traditional thing is you get a group project, especially early on, and it becomes a one-person project. Mm-hmm. Like one person does all the pieces and then feels resentful, and then everyone else is like, "Cool, thanks for the B-," and the other person's like, how do you? Maybe this is beyond the question of what we're talking about today, but how do you not have that happen on a larger scale just over and over again?
So what I see happening in a lot of educational setups is that projects are the exception. So students get thrown into a team and are challenged by a project, and they don't really care about the project most of the time, and they've never learned how to work as a team. So it has to be a frustrating experience. That's something you have to learn? This is actual skills you need to work together as a team and be productive. So if project-based learning is the standard, then of course you need to prepare your students for these team-based activities, and they can learn and reflect and become better at working together and working as a team. And so the teamwork becomes less and less frustrating, even though you might fail as a team in the beginning because you don't know how to collaborate, how to work together. But if it works, it also is a great chance to get to know other people, other students. Peer learning starts happening because you start to support each other. And one student is already good at something that's needed in the project. Someone else is still struggling with it. You can sit together and figure it out. You actually get to know your fellow students on a different level because you see them struggling or you see them being proud about something. And you even can, and we see this with our students, even if it's outside the classroom and they don't need to anymore, they continue working on these projects. So you can even see teams of students, even younger students, continue working in the afternoon on these projects on their own, trying to get to the next level. And that all starts being a learning environment where learning is not what the teacher expects you to do, but learning becomes an activity that you own and a goal that you are pursuing.
Nice.
I was always in grade school and high school the person who would do all the work in the projects, but now the tables have turned.
That makes sense. That
I'm in grad school, and now I just don't do anything, and I'm put on a team, and then I just say, I don't know, guys, I don't know, and they just do all the work, and I'm like, oh, this is what it feels like to be like carried along by the team.
Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer?
Oh, definitely the second one. Definitely just being
but
like.
That's sending the wrong. You were supposed to say it's good to be the worker.
Well, I think I cared about my education when I was like a teenager. Now I'm just trying to get the degree. I don't think anyone's listening to this who's like my teacher in my master's degree that I'm getting, but it's just so well because it's exactly this what Manuel's saying. It's a completely lecture reading curricular based thing, and the projects are completely artificial and totally structured. So I don't actually have any say. I mean, I get to say the topic, right? I'm supposed to do a project where I talk about like a teacher leadership. Well, how am I going to be a teacher leader? And I get to sort of design how I would be like a teacher leader. Okay, but it's really just a 3-page paper, That's all it is, where you just kind of BS about how you could do one thing or another for 3 or 4 pages. That's not really a project. Like a project would be actually go and start your teacher leadership, actually go and initiate, whatever, get the resources, get the contacts you need. Oh, you couldn't get the contacts you needed. Why couldn't you? What were the blockers? What were, you'd have all these sort of false starts and problems, and that's where the actual learning would occur. I don't mean to steal Manuel's thunder here because I also specialize in project-based. I mean, that's where we chat is because we both do project-based learning to help our students. So what I'm saying is, even though I think my teachers in the schooling I'm doing right now think they're doing like a big project at the end, it's actually not really a project. It's more just this sort of performative sort of paper in the form of looks like a project, but really it's just another sort of research paper.
So then maybe here's a question for both of you. How did you both become such a proponent for project-based learning? Like what started that, or what was it that changed it to be like, oh, this needs to be a thing?
For me, it started actually with problem-based learning that I described before. I initially was fascinated by the idea of problem-based learning because I experienced a medical study program that was completely problem-based. So students wouldn't start with learning biology, chemistry, and physics in the beginning, but they would be confronted with a patient case on paper from day one. And this patient described with diagnosis and data and everything would be then the trigger point for them to figure out, what do I need to learn and understand in order to diagnose this patient or to decide for treatment or for whatever. And these patient cases were designed in a way that they would lead students to all the necessary learning goals for a medical student. And I found this intriguing in the beginning, but then I started looking into it and trying to really understand the theory behind it. And I figured out that it's highly artificial. And it doesn't leave any room for the students to actually own their own learning experience, because it's still a predefined path you have to follow. It's just a different kind of design. So it doesn't reveal everything in the beginning. You kind of discover the next steps as you go, but somebody else has already made all the decisions for you. And then I've wondered myself, what's the next step? Where do I get more freedom into this? And what I was actually looking for is, a learning experience for where students would experience self-determination and self-efficacy, because that's what for me is the main outcome of that students experience themselves as someone who can take on challenges and somehow solve them and make a difference. And this feeling boosts your confidence and lets you imagine that you would be able to take on the next bigger challenge, the next bigger problem. And all of a sudden, you have a mindset of someone who has an entrepreneurial mindset or a growth mindset or whatever you want to call it. This idea that I have what it takes to make a difference in whatever setting I am. And I think that's the ultimate goal of any education, needs to be that people have this kind of confidence, not a superficial confidence that's boosted by false praise, but a confidence that is built on these experiences of self-determination and self-efficacy. And that's what real projects allow you to have.
And there's also humility too. I mean, you're confident, but you're also super humble because you've been battered about by reality, by these actual stumbling blocks and false starts and frustrations and challenges. You're like, oh, wow, I'm not going to be the one who just gets to call the shots and make everything happen the way sort of I think it's going to happen. I'm going to be in this sort of dance, and I'm going to be frustrated at times. And so it gives you it's weirdly paradoxical because it gives you confidence. And I see what you mean by that, like the kind of confidence to try and the confidence to make an attempt, but it also gives you the humility to not think you're just like someone who got straight A's and therefore just deserves everything to be given to you. And when you first hit your first challenge, you have like a crisis because, it's not just like as easy as getting an A on some stupid test,
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, what would a project for like a kindergarten age, I'm trying to think of
Cold Fusion.
What level of ownership? Please get all the kindergartners on Cold Fusion. Children with Fusion.
Early, yeah.
Lego Cold Fusion set. Yeah, I've seen that.
It can be the easiest thing. So if I just watch my kids doing things, one of my kids is really into just building stuff with tools, and as long as it kind of makes a sound and you can destroy things and put them back together, they're fascinating by it. Yeah. It could be something in the garden. It could be just growing plants. It could be also going out and getting to know people. What I also love is that you can put service learning into that as well. So you can actually leave the boundaries of the school or university you're in and go out into the world, get in touch with other people, figure out what things they're challenged by or what things they're dealing with, and trying to come up with solutions. That can be really easy things. It could be just make something beautiful and give it to the elderly lady next door and make her happy. It doesn't really, especially in kindergarten or primary school, it doesn't really be very, very sophisticated. The most important thing is that students identify with it and make it their own thing and are somehow fascinated by it and get to train some of the skills you want them to have. Writing texts, reading, putting things together.
Yeah. Cooking is an excellent one.
Yeah. Cooking
is excellent.
When I spent 6 years living in Japan, and I taught in schools, and from elementary on up, I was mostly in junior high, but I went to all different levels. But the kids would help with the cleaning. I mean, famously cleaning the school. They have cleaning time, sojijikan every day, and they would also help with lunch preparation and lunch serving. Like you would bring in the lunch and serve it to your classmates in your class and take turns, rotate out. And it gives them this ownership of the experience, and it gives them this involvement with the school that I do see lacking in American schools.
And now imagine these students. You send them to the market, to the farmers market, and they have money and they have to buy stuff and calculate how much money they have and what they need and what change they have to get back. And you can add different challenges with regards to the different subjects you want them to learn things about. But still, it feels like they have ownership and it's their project and they're expected to deliver something.
I think this would make people dangerously free thinking, Manuel. I think we would upset the balance of society pretty quickly if even 10% of people had this good of an education. They would be like, wait, I mean, I don't know about Germany, but in America, it'd be like, wait, why are we doing like endless wars that make no sense? Like, why are we doing this stupid crap? We have to keep people, in the darkness, dunkel. Dunkelheit.
Oh man, let's not go down that rabbit hole.
Oh no. Yeah.
If you guys switch to German, I will be very lost very quickly. I took 1 year of German in 9th grade, and I do not remember all that much of it.
I tried to learn Japanese for a couple of years, and there's nothing left. So I feel you.
Oh yeah,
There
Japanese. The word dunkel in German means darkness, but it almost it has a more poetical meaning than the word darkness in English. It means like benighted. Like it means like this sort of
cool
mythological sound to it.
Every language has cooler words than English. I mean, that's just
but that's why English
we have to face.
absorbs them like a vacuum cleaner, right? English just sucks up any word we like. It's so cool. So does German
that's
too,
one
actually.
word for it. Cool.
Yeah.
It makes it impossible to learn for other people, but it's so cool of us.
Yeah. Like run amok. That's a really weird English word. That's from Malay. That's a Malay word, or Indonesian. It's either Indonesian or Malay. But yeah, run amok. Isn't that crazy? That's one of the most foreign words in English.
What does it mean?
It's difficult.
It means to run amok means like a mob of people that are like running around smashing things and like burning things, like a riot.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, run amok.
Yeah. I had a funny word I was struggling with. I heard a podcast from a longevity researcher, and he was talking about rucking. And
rucking.
For the love of God, couldn't figure out what rucking exactly.
It's
and
Britain,
then it comes from the German word Rucksack.
Rucksack,
which in
which
English
rucksack?
is
You can say in English
exactly.
Too.
It's rucksack, and then they turned it into rucking. And me, as a German native speaker, had no idea what he was talking about.
Sounds kind of vulgar, actually.
That's a hard part about Japanese too, because they will take in words from other languages, and usually they're English words that get turned into like a Japanese version of English. But then German words will show up there too, or French or other, like, so the word for like a part-time job is Arbeito, which is from it's a German import instead of an English.
Cool.
And so you have to learn certain ones to be like, why is this word? Oh, because of the other language. Okay, cool.
That's awesome. What my Japanese teacher always told me. You have to know this word. It's an English word. But I was so confused by the pronunciation that I had no idea. It's like furenzu furaizu. Well, it's French fries, if you know that, or aisukurimu is ice cream, but it's really, really hard sometimes.
I could not believe that sometimes if I went and said, where is McDonald's? They'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'd be like, but if I go Makudonado, they're like, I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm like, really? That's that far apart. Okay.
But the Germans do another thing, which is they actually pronounce it with the foreign pronunciation, and that's normal in Germany. So they'll say like chance for chance.
Yeah,
in
we're
French.
trying to be respectful of other languages.
French accent.
That is very respectful. Yeah. I appreciate
it. In America, if people do that, that's considered like really, really sort of snooty.
Hoity-toity.
Yeah, sort of know-it-all. Yes. Like if someone's like, we are going to or what's an example? People do this with French words.
Have you heard the news from Afghanistan?
Yeah, right.
People are like, okay.
Not good. But in German, that would be totally acceptable and considered good and sort of good breeding and smart, So here's an interesting challenge, which is, what about the humanities, right? Like we just talked about like learning a bunch of interesting words and language stuff. How would you do I have some ideas about this, but I'll just say it would seem from the outside of a challenge to like learn to like read a bunch of English literature as part of a project-based learning curriculum. It seems like project-based curriculum is almost more geared towards hands-on and sort of tangible. Some people would call it vocational, although I hate that differentiation between vocational and, but yeah. So how do you kind of get the more kind of academic or kind of humanities side into a project-based learning curriculum?
There's a lot of things you can do. At Code University, we have what we call our Science, Technology, and Society program. So we challenge all our students, if they want to be software engineers or interaction designers, to actually learn about basic philosophical ideas and how technology influences society and how to think about this. And what we create is sometimes kind of artificial projects where we say, hey, let's invite an expert to talk about a certain topic. But you as students, you will need to be prepared so we can ask intelligent questions and basically have a discussion with him or her. And that challenges them to actually dive into the topic and get ready for that. And that you could call that a project. or ask students, maybe younger students, to write a newspaper article in the local newspaper, or publish something on a blog, or actually do a podcast and prepare for it so you can actually be an expert in something. I think there's a lot of settings. It's not the thing that we think about when we hear project usually, because usually project is something hands-on. But I think you can also find ways to use that approach for the humanities.
I'll go. So I have this training in what's called the Great Books, which is like the kind of ultimate humanities. It's like where you read the Iliad and the Odyssey and Plato and Aristotle and blah, 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 blah. Kind of read all the greats. And I actually extended my reading into the Eastern classics as well. So I read the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedas and the Upanishads and, the Ramayana and the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata and all these other things, and Buddhist sutras, et cetera, et cetera. And what's interesting I've found is that when you take a very sort of academic sort of approach, you treat these things as if they're in sort of crystal cases. You kind of treat them like they're these sort of angelic sort of gifts handed down to us, and that's how most like sort of professors treat these things, right? And they kind of bow down at the feet of the masters of these books, and they're like, oh, Aristotle, it's just handed down to us from heaven or something. But when you actually when you actually really read it and you really understand like what Aristotle was doing, he was just a guy who put his pants on every day, one leg at a time, or his robe, one tie at a time.
I don't know if he wore pants.
Yeah, I don't think he wore pants. He was free. He was
pre-pants.
Yeah, he was
pre-pants man.
But what you realize is that actually each book that he wrote was actually a project where he was trying to do something in the realm of ideas, and through persuasion and through logic and through, rhetoric and through even to some extent entertainment, he was trying to achieve a project in the world, which was largely persuading people of the world being a certain way, which then would have some effect on the world. Like, for example, Aristotle is famously the first philosopher. I mean, he's only the second one, really, but I mean, he's the first philosopher in the West to say, what would society be like without slaves? Maybe it would be better. Mm-hmm. And he actually talks about how it might be better if there weren't slaves, and that the ideal state wouldn't have slaves. It would have universal citizenship. I mean, he says that in the Politics, which is unbelievable, that he could conceive of that. And then that he's writing a book. It's almost like his project was part of the project of eliminating slavery. It was just the very, very beginning of it, where you could just say what if we didn't do that, And then later there were projects to actually eliminate slavery, more, concretely. But
he came out and he was like, hey guys, hey. And they're like, yeah. And he's like, what if we don't own other people? And they're like, Aristotle,
get out of here.
What are you talking? Also, what is on your legs? And he's like, oh, these are called pants. I just invented them. Check it out. I don't have to wear these robes anymore. They're like, you wacky dude, get out of here.
Look at me ride a horse so easily. But yeah, so the liberal arts, I think, actually are project-based learning.
Yeah. Exactly. So there's things can become real just because you think about them in a certain way. And there's a lot of things you can do in politics. If you're studying political sciences, you can actually figure out what it takes to found a party. I don't know, in the US, there's probably not possible, but in Germany, you can actually found a new party. So figure out what it takes, actually go through the process, whether you end up doing it or not, or found your own first NGO, your company. Do something, publish something on Wikipedia and get ripped by all the commentators, or get involved somewhere, somehow with your ideas, get out there. Right. I think, again, the idea is not that there's a physical thing in the end, but that there's the idea of ownership, and you do something that you're interested in. And
it does stay very practical, though. I wonder about really having someone really go and, for example, read 5 Platonic dialogues and really understand Plato. That sounds like a pretty strange. At some point, we're departing from project-based learning to some extent, maybe.
The question was, why should someone care? Why should a person do that? Apart from them being intrinsically motivated, I mean, then they do it on their own. They don't need any educational institution for that.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question. So, why should I do that? Yeah,
I think if you were to do this, if you were to start this here in America, to get it. It would look like a charter school first, right? Because my daughter went to a charter Montessori school for kindergarten, but it was a kindergarten through 5th grade school, and they did Montessori learning throughout. But it was just like a kind of a single school experiment thing, and then the idea is they show evidence of it working and having really beneficial effects on the students, and they expand it. So would that be what it would look like in a practical sense? I don't know how familiar you are with the American education system, or I am either, but would it be like a charter school that starts for like kindergarten through 6th, and then you just kind of expand it out? Or how do we do this?
Yeah. I mean, that's what you could do, private or charter. But yes, but you would always be kind of too small to actually make a change. What I'm wondering is, what would it take to get this into the majority of schools in the state system? What would it take to actually turn our state schools into project-based learning environments? What would it mean for the curriculum, for the teachers and their role? Would we need more teachers, or maybe even less? I would argue that we probably could free up some resources there, integrate other people. So that's because if you want to change something that really makes a difference, not just for a few people who already know about these opportunities and can afford them, but really affect the majority of students, you need to find a way to integrate this into the state school system that we have. And I think that's the biggest challenge. I don't know about the US, but in Germany, we're running into such a severe teacher shortage over the course of the next 10 years. It's
we are too.
Mind-blowing.
I think we're already in a really bad teacher shortage. Yeah.
So we can't continue with the status quo. We need to find new approaches.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're also going to have to fight the mafia-style power of the textbook industry over here, because the textbook industry is not going to like the idea. That's right. And they're like, hey, what? You don't need our dry textbooks anymore at $300 a pop? This is not going to fly. So you're going to have to deal with an angry...
Let them come up with project suggestions. Let them come up with a collection of projects designed for every grade, right. So students can really get involved and learn the things they need to learn.
That might be a way in, actually, is publish the first project-based textbook, and then people, because people know how to buy textbooks and work out of textbooks. So just write that textbook and sell it, you know. Mm-hmm.
The challenge would be to not do this for individual subjects, but really bring them all together. And that would, of course, require also the teachers to come together and say, hey, this project includes math and biology and writing or whatever.
I mean, Manuel, you might have the same theory of change that I do, because we're both starting innovative colleges, but, all schooling before college is really built to get you into college, right? So I think the way to change these things is to start colleges that are based on this principle, and then say our admissions are, we will take the person who has the most projects under their belt by the time they're 18.
Yep.
And then now that sort of sends the signal down through the system. Hey, you can just do projects all day long, and you can get into this family of great colleges,
Well, that was a part of high school prep for college, was doing volunteer hours for different service organizations or whatever, and making sure I had my volunteer hours to get to qualify for whatever scholarship I was trying to get. But it could be project hours, or completed projects,
or portfolio projects. Yeah. One thing about this that might be a kind of facet of it that we haven't discussed is the idea of play-based learning, because I think play-based learning is childish project-based learning, if you think about it. Like a grown-up who's doing a project is almost the same as a child doing play, because the child sort of constructs a sort of thing that they're doing to play, right? Like they're acting like they're in a house, or they're putting together a spaceship with Legos, or they're playing it, but the play always takes the form of a little project. And maybe it doesn't have very much seriousness in the world, in the grander context, but it has a seriousness for that child at that moment. Actually, Nietzsche, the famous German philosopher, said, true seriousness or true maturity is to regain the seriousness of a child at play. So, if you have a bunch of adults sitting around saying, oh, we're doing this thing, oh, we're part of a conference, oh, we're setting this up, and they're fundamentally unserious people, right? Because they're being irresponsible, they're pumping pollution into the air, they're, doing stupid performative, things all day long. That they don't have the seriousness of a child at play, and therefore they're not actually mature people. They're just acting like, like babies.
I totally agree. I think every project, whether it's part of a learning environment or not, could have this kind of playfulness. I mean, if you have this inner calmness, this inner confidence where you say, yeah, this is a project. It might fail. I'm doing this because I'm intrigued by it. I want to learn about this. I want to succeed with it. This can have this kind of playfulness. Ideally, it would have.
Well, that's the weird thing, though, is that what Nietzsche's pointing out is that when you look at a child playing, when they're sort of focused, they're not like, they're not like,
no, for them, it's serious work.
Yeah. It's very serious. And it'd be great to find that level of seriousness in like a 20-year-old actually really focusing, doing something, not just sitting in class like, oh, this is so stupid and boring, or pretending to be focused. I love all the students who are like pretending to be super interested in something that is clearly the most boring thing ever. It's so performative. I hate it.
But play locks in that emotional component that makes you remember and learn, instead of boredom which checks you out immediately of being able to.
And I think children can only get into that state if they're in a safe environment, if they're free from external pressure and also external expectations. No child would ever come into this playful state of mind if they knew that there was some grown-up expecting something from them in the end, and they would be afraid to fail or to not deliver or something like that.
Right.
Some stern person, play! Come on, play!
Just play!
Play better!
Keep playing!
Come on!
You didn't play very well. Play. You got a B in play. You got a B- in your play. It's like, oh my God, get away from me, humans. You humans suck so bad. Yeah, my partner teaches dance, and they're obsessed. The parents especially are like obsessed with the competition. And then the dances get like rated, and it's like, oh, you only got third place. And then there's like consequences for the dancers and the teachers if they get low places in the competition. And I'm just like, what the hell kind of torturous draconian dance? I mean, it's dancing. The whole point is to like enjoy the movement and like, it's like an artistic experience. Why is it this like hyper competitive thing? It's so dumb.
I got so angry when I listened to the Finland school episode of your podcast when one of the women talked about the fact that parents were complaining because when they asked their children, what did you do at school today? And the children said, we were playing. Yeah. We played, and parents get concerned and they get in touch with the teachers. What are you doing? My child tells me they're only playing at school.
Yeah. You know who's the real philosopher and sort of psychologist around that is Vygotsky. Are you familiar with Vygotsky at all?
No.
He's a really. I think that might not be surprising because actually his work.
I'm not either. I'm not either.
Oh, Scott, that's okay. I wasn't expecting.
You didn't accidentally think I might be? Okay, cool. Okay, cool.
But Vygotsky's better known in North America, actually, because he died when he was like 32, like young, before he could like really write like a magnum opus. And so we really just have his notes, and Europeans kind of have historically looked at his stuff and been like, we don't really like what he's saying, and they don't really kind of take it very seriously. But North American psychologists have taken Vygotsky's notes and kind of sort of like Jurassic Park-esque. They kind of put, tropical frog DNA in and sort of patched up the notes and sort of came up with their own theory. And it's very much focused on how children learn from play, and how play, what they call dramatic play, is like super important for children learning all kinds of things. And the interesting thing about Vygotsky was he was the first psychologist to not sort of put children like B.F. Skinner, like in cages and like kind of poke and prod them and like, see what, comes out. Instead, he would just sit around and just watch the kids. He would just sit and just almost like a biologist, just sort of write down what the kids were doing. And lo and behold, if you just watch kids, they just spontaneously play a lot, and they do this crazy, all this play. And so that's where he got his theory of like, oh, we should base education on play.
That's, by the way, a great thing I can highly recommend as someone who's really interested in education and in learning, how learning works. Make sure you have another child that you can watch carefully growing up. My older kids are 14 and 10, so I kind of missed the first years because I didn't have this focus on education and learning and how learning works. But now we have another young one who's just 15 months old. And it's so fascinating to watch him just discover the world, figure things out, learn things, and be curious about stuff. And that's the best thing to do, is just have time to watch him discover the world.
Yeah, it's good because people are like, oh, you get into school and then you start learning. You're like, no. We're humans. We are just naturally learning from birth. Like
it's the other way around. In a way, you stop learning once you get into school. Because up until that point, you learn driven by your own curiosity. You are only curious about the world. And you discover things because you're curious about it. And with first grade, basically, your curiosity is getting taken out of the equation because nobody asks you anymore. We have students, they arrive at Code University, and what we do is we try to reintroduce them to the idea of curiosity-driven learning. So they should figure out what they're curious about. And some of them realize, damn, nobody has asked me that for the last 12 years. At no point in time did anyone approach me and say, what is it that you're interested in and what do you want to learn? And that's what you could reintroduce with projects.
Yeah, when they realize it may be you're calling it project-based learning, but I think what I would call it is what's called either free schooling or democratic free schooling. There's a book called you might have read it. It's called Free at Last about the Sudbury Valley schools. And they were started. Yeah, they're kind of a free school, or Summerhill. Summerhill is the famous one in England. But the history of Summerhill is actually it was in Dresden. So the guy who started Summerhill was actually the intern. He was just some tag-along guy in Dresden at what was called the International Schule in Dresden, and that's where the German educators were actually innovating. Bohemians, they were Bohemians, right? Because that's Bohemia, Dresden, and they were innovating at this idea of free schooling, just the students deciding what they would learn. And this Scottish guy was just hanging out there because he just got kind of lost after like World War I. He was just hanging out there as a journalist, and he got kind of tagged along. Anyways, the Nazis shut him down. Right, the Nazis said, "No, we're not going to do schools where students just learn whatever they want. That's not Nazi.
It's a dangerous idea." Yeah,
it's a dangerous idea. And so then he fled. The actual International Schule people were screwed because they were German. They had to stay there. But he fled back to Scotland where he sort of belonged, and then he started a sort of shadow of what the International School was. So that might be something to look at too. Is if you go and look at that history of the International Schule in Dresden, that's actually the real heritage of free schooling, because Summerhill then became the inspiration for Sudbury Valley, which has been kind of the inspiration of free schooling in America in general. But it all really goes back to Dresden. So that could be an interesting thing to look at.
Definitely have to look into that.
Yeah.
Well, I think what we can all agree on is the current way that we try to put information into young people doesn't work. It's not super efficient, and it's like terribly unfun for the young person. And that needs to be fixed.
The real fundamental switch too that I had in my mind, and maybe Manuel or Scott, you've had the same switch, is going from to one theory of learning to another. So one theory of learning is people are sort of empty and you need to sort of fill them with knowledge. And that's the sort of traditional sort of, and that's what John Dewey says. Everyone loves John Dewey, but that's what he says. He says education is communication. You're communicating knowledge from one person to another, and that's what education is. The alternative is Vygotsky. So Vygotsky is really the root of what's called constructivist learning theory, which says knowledge is never communicated between one person and another. Knowledge is created afresh in every agent. So every human builds knowledge in their mind out of their environment. And that's what more knowledge is. And so knowledge creation is not transfer of knowledge into the person. It's actually ignition of the creation of knowledge in the person. And that's why environmental-based strategies like project-based learning, free schooling, et cetera, are just more effective, because you're actually going with the way the human beings actually work, which is they construct knowledge in their own minds. They don't receive knowledge through the airwaves and sort of pack it away into the warehouse of their brain.
Absolutely. And you see this when you look at how our schools or universities are designed. They're designed around teaching and the process of teaching and the content that gets taught. It's never about the learners and the activity of learning that happens within them. This is just a result. It's not part of the design of the learning environment.
Yeah, and I think I'll just pitch too that the real radical thing to do is to start new colleges. That's the radical thing. That's what you're doing. That's what I'm doing. Like, that's the really radical thing. Because if we can't start new colleges, then it just stays the same way.
I'm not doing that, I guess.
Are you starting a new college, Scott?
I'm the only one. No, I'm the only one on the call not starting. I feel really left out now. But
you can come help me. Come help me. I need help. You're helping. You're helping.
Peer pressure here is
You're helping.
unbelievable right now. Okay,
You're helping.
Okay.
Come on. Just take a drink. It's cool. All the kids are starting new colleges. Everyone's who's cool.
Oh,
does
okay.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyways, I think that's the change, because if we don't start new colleges, then it just stays like this. But if you start new schools, they all end up leading to colleges that are broken again. So it's like if you start at the bottom, it's like the German saying, the fish fängt an Kopf zu stinken. Yeah, stink from Kopf. The fish begins to stink at the head, as the German saying, the Northern German saying. And so it's the same thing. I think the fish stinks at the head. And so we have to start colleges at the head, and then that will send the signal through our admissions policies. That'll send the signal through the whole educational system. That's my theory of how to do it.
That might be, but I still remember I gave a talk about code and our learning concept, and after that, a younger listener from the audience approached me and said, "Yeah, that's all fine, but I'm in 10th grade and I'm suffering. So what are you doing about that?"
Well, you could say,
I think we're losing losing a lot of students on the way if we kind of don't start at the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like it's important on both ends of the spectrum, because you need a funnel to get them there and a place to get them to. So, I mean, start some colleges and start some primary schools that are all based around this thing, and kind of
if you want to restart the international school in Dresden, I'll come help you do it. That would be really historic.
Let's do this.
That'd be so cool.
I think
you're really drawing on that history.
It might solve one issue that keeps a lot of schools from actually innovating, and that are parents. Parents are so keen on seeing the results. They're expecting seeing good grades and wanting to understand that their students are learning the stuff that's in the book. I think what students are struggling with, parents are struggling with when it comes to concepts like Waldorf or Montessori, sometimes they don't really know whether or not their students are learning or progressing, or whether everything's fine. So they're really worried about that. And if you change to a project-based environment, students produce results all the time, so their parents can actually see what's happening. They can be proud of their of their children. They can see that their children are mastering something. And I think that leaves them much more calm and much more relaxed when it comes to these new innovative learning approaches.
I love that.
I got good news for you.
Oh,
rent in Dresden is 76% lower than it is in Brooklyn, and 81% lower than San Francisco. We could go to Dresden. Adam.
Dresden's a beautiful place too. Wonderful place.
This is good.
We can have Weisswurst and Senf. It's in Bavaria, so they have all this delicious Bavarian food.
Dresden is not in Bavaria. No. That's Eastern Germany.
It's northeast.
It's close. It's close enough.
It's a little north of Bavaria.
From an American perspective, in Germany, everything is close by. So,
Manuel, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us, Manuel Dolderer.
Thanks for having me.
Is there a way for listeners to get in touch with you, or would you like that, or a way for them to follow your work or check out your university? Where would they go?
So the university is code.berlin. Pretty easy. And my email, if you want to send me an email, is manuel@code.berlin. Pretty easy.
We'll put it on
go to the website. You can also find me on LinkedIn, on the social medias, Twitter. Still on Twitter. And I'd love to just chat with people, discuss ideas, especially meet people who are somehow entrepreneurs in the educational space, trying to set up something new, innovate what's going on. So yeah, please reach out.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us. It's been awesome having this discussion. I'm learning about project-based learning, and it sounds... I'm always swayed by the end of these things. I'm like, yes, this is the thing we need. So I'm there with this as well. I'm excited.
Yeah,
perfect.
Really
Thanks
awesome.
for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for listening and joining us. Join us again next week for another episode.
Take care.
Bye.
Hey there, thanks for listening to that episode of Solutions from the Multiverse.
Yeah, we're back with a little after roll. Hello.
Hey, after roll. Roll that after roll. So basically, we want you to subscribe.
Yeah.
And rate and review. And tell someone, like, take your favorite solution and send it to someone who you think would like blow their mind to hear it.
Yeah, we love making the show. We're proud of it. And we're excited. We want other people to show. We know that the main way people find podcasts is word of mouth. I know that's true for me. I listen to my friends who also listen to podcasts tell me about ones, and I go, okay, I'm cluing into that. So we want to be part of that chain.
So thanks for being a part of Solutions.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again real soon.
Bye.
Bye.